Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. If you like my work, please subscribe to the channel, like this video and write a comment. This helps the video to promote and motivates you to try harder every day. If you want to support the channel financially, the link is in the description and in the profile header. Thank you. Enjoy listening. I never thought I'd end up working in the sewers. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a firefighter, one of those heroes who saved people from burning buildings and climbed up ladders into smoke-filled windows. Life had different plans for me. The job posting was simple: Search and Rescue Officer, Urban Infrastructure Division. The pay was decent, the benefits solid. It wasn't until after my first week on the job that I realized the real reason why they needed people. Our team operates deep below the city, in a vast, labyrinthine sewer system that most people never think about. It's not just tunnels of running water. There are maintenance rooms, service corridors, and abandoned sections that date back to the city's earliest days. Some parts are so old, they don't even appear on modern maps. Those are the places we avoid. On my first day, my supervisor, a gruff but fair man named Cooper, handed me a laminated sheet of paper. Read these. Memorize them. Don't question them. I looked at the list. It wasn't what I expected. Rules for urban rescue officers. If you hear a voice calling for help, verify the source before approaching. If the voice repeats the exact same phrase more than twice, leave immediately. Never look directly into the water for too long. If you see something looking back, report it to command and exit the area. If your radio starts picking up static, turn around and retrace your steps. Do not try to communicate. If you find a door that isn't on your map, do not open it. Mark it and move on. Never, under any circumstances, follow someone who isn't wearing an official uniform, even if they look like your partner. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Walk faster. If you get lost, stay put. Do not try to navigate by memory. We will find you. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Cooper's face remained stone cold. No, kid. These are the rules that keep you alive. I wanted to argue, to tell him this sounded like some ridiculous initiation prank, but something in his expression stopped me. The other officers around me weren't laughing either. One of them, an older guy named Martinez, just shook his head and muttered, "Wish I'd taken this job less seriously at first. Would have slept better before I learned the truth." That first night, I went home with the list still in my pocket, reading it over again and again. It didn't make sense, but it unsettled me in a way I couldn't shake. What the hell was down there that required rules like these? My first call came a week later. A missing person, last seen near a maintenance hatch behind an old subway station. Routine, they told me. Just a lost vagrant, most likely. Cooper and I suited up, checked our gear, and descended into the tunnels. The smell hit first, a thick, cloying mix of damp rot and industrial waste. I pulled my mask tighter, trying not to gag. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. The only sounds were our boots sloshing through the shallow water and the occasional drip of condensation from above. We followed the path to where the man was last seen. A flashlight had been left behind, its beam still flickering against the slick wall. No sign of the man. Then I heard it. "Help me." A faint voice, coming from somewhere up ahead. I stepped forward, but Cooper grabbed my arm. "Hold up," he whispered. "Listen." The voice called again. Same words. Same tone. No variation. "Help me." Then again. Exactly the same. The hair on my arm stood up. Cooper exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "We're leaving." I wanted to argue, we had a job to do, but something about the way he turned on his heel, the urgency in his steps, made me follow without question. We retraced our route quickly, not speaking until we were back at the access ladder. Only then did Cooper relax. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. He looked at me, his face grim. You ever hear a recording loop? How it repeats exactly the same every time. I nodded. That wasn't a man calling for help. He paused. And whatever it was, it knew we were listening. That night, I barely slept. I dreamed of voices in the dark, of eyes watching from the water. And when I woke up, the rules were still fresh in my mind. I wasn't laughing anymore. After my first encounter with whatever lurked in the tunnels, I stopped questioning the rules. I still didn't understand them, but I followed them to the letter. I had seen the way Cooper and the others treated them like gospel. And after hearing that voice mimic a desperate plea for help, I knew better than to think this was some elaborate hazing ritual. The next morning, I showed up at the station early, hoping to get some answers. Martinez was already there, sipping his usual burnt coffee and flipping through a logbook. He gave me a knowing look as I hesitated in the doorway. Couldn't sleep, huh? I shook my head. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. Ask what you need to ask. I hesitated before pulling out the laminated list of rules Cooper had given me. Who made these? I asked. Martinez leaned back, rubbing his temple. They've been around longer than any of us. Passed down from the guys who came before. You hear stories. You see things. The rules keep you alive. I ran a finger down the list, pausing on the second one. The water. What happens if you look too long? Martinez's expression darkened. You don't want to find out. I waited for him to continue, but he didn't. Instead, he stood, stretched, and tossed his empty coffee cup in the trash. You'll learn soon enough, kid. But if you're smart, you won't push it. That night, I was on shift with a guy named Reynolds. He was newer than me, but he carried himself like he had something to prove. Overconfident. A bad trait down here. Our assignment was simple, routine patrol. Check access points, make sure no civilians had wandered where they shouldn't. Easy enough. Or so I thought. We had just reached one of the older tunnels when Reynolds stopped. Look at that, he said, pointing to a faint glow up ahead. I frowned. There shouldn't have been any lights down here. We mark it and move on, I said, remembering Rule 4. Reynolds scoffed. Come on, man. You don't wonder what's back there? Not my job to wonder, I said firmly. But he was already moving toward it. I swore under my breath and followed. If something happened to him, it would be on me. As we stepped closer, I saw the glow was coming from beneath the water, a faint, shifting light, like something bioluminescent was swimming just beneath the surface. Reynolds knelt beside the edge. Damn. You ever see anything like... Back up. My voice was sharper than I intended. He didn't listen. He leaned in. And then the water moved. Not like a ripple. Not like something swimming by. It pulled toward him like it was reaching out. The glow pulsed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shape beneath the surface, something wrong, something that shouldn't be there. Reynolds gasped, jerking back. His face went pale. Jesus Christ. I grabbed his arm and yanked him away. Don't look. We stumbled backward, breathing hard. The water stilled, the glow fading like it had never been there at all. Reynolds stared at me, eyes wide. Did you see? I saw enough. I cut him off. We're leaving. We didn't talk the rest of the way back. When we reached the station, Cooper took one look at us and nodded. You get too close to the water? Reynolds hesitated, then nodded. Cooper sighed. Go home. Get some sleep. If you hear anything tonight, don't listen. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. I was starting to learn that the worst thing about working down in the tunnels wasn't the smell or the claustrophobia, it was the waiting. Hours of routine, of walking through damp corridors and checking maintenance hatches, waiting for something to happen. The problem was, when something did happen, you almost always wished it hadn't. The call came in at 2:13 a.m. A missing person. A transient, last seen near a maintenance shaft that led directly into the tunnels. This was common. Homeless people sometimes took shelter down there, not knowing or not believing the dangers that lurked beneath the city. Cooper gave me a nod as I checked my gear. "Take Martinez with you," he said. "Follow protocol. And if anything feels off, you turn around. Understood?" I nodded. Understood. We reached the entrance to the tunnels within 20 minutes. The man who reported the missing person, a subway worker finishing the night shift, was still there. His face was pale, and he kept shifting on his feet like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. I didn't see much," he stammered. "Just a guy, maybe 40, long coat, beard." I told him he couldn't stay down there. He just looked at me, smiled, and said he was waiting for someone. Martinez frowned. "Waiting for who?" The worker shook his head. "Didn't say. Just climbed down the maintenance hatch." "And you didn't follow?" I asked. The man let out a dry laugh. "Hell no. I heard some of you guys talk about the tunnels. I called it in and left." I couldn't blame him. Martinez and I descended into the tunnels, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The deeper we went, the more the city above us seemed like a distant memory. The walls dripped with moisture, and the air smelled of decay. We reached the spot where the transient was last seen. The water was undisturbed, the tunnel stretching ahead in eerie silence. Then we heard it. A voice, faint but clear. "Help me." I froze, Martinez beside me. The words echoed down the corridor, bouncing off the slick walls. "Help me." I glanced at Martinez. "Did that sound off to you?" He nodded slowly. Like a recording. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The last time I heard a voice repeat itself like that, Cooper had pulled me out immediately. We should have left. We should have followed the rules. Instead, we moved forward. The voice led us deeper into the tunnels, always just ahead, always exactly the same. No change in tone. No desperation. Just the same two words, perfectly repeated, as if something was waiting for us to get close enough. Then we saw the figure. A man stood at the far end of the tunnel, half shrouded in shadows. He wasn't moving. His back was turned to us, his posture unnaturally stiff. Martinez raised his flashlight. "Sir, we're here to help. Are you injured?" The figure didn't react. Martinez took a step forward. "Sir?" The figure twitched. Not a natural movement, sharp and jerky, like a puppet whose strings had just been yanked. Then it mimicked Martinez's voice. "Sir?" Perfectly. Down to the tone, the hesitation. A chill ran down my spine. Martinez stopped in his tracks. I could see his breathing quicken, his fingers tightening around his flashlight. "Back up," I whispered. The figure twitched again. And then it turned. The face was wrong. Too smooth. Too featureless. Like someone had blurred out all the details, leaving behind only a vague impression of a human. The mouth opened, but no sound came out. Martinez grabbed my arm. "Run." We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted back the way we came, the sound of splashing water behind us. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was following. We reached the ladder, scrambling up as fast as we could. Martinez was already halfway up when I heard it again. My own voice. Repeating the last thing I said. I didn't stop to think. I hauled myself out of the tunnels and slammed the maintenance hatch shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. Martinez and I sat there, gasping for breath. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Then he looked at me and whispered, "That wasn't a person." I swallowed hard. "No, it wasn't." We reported what happened to Cooper. He listened, then simply nodded. "You followed it further than you should have," he said. "Next time you hear a voice repeat itself, you turn around." I didn't argue. I just nodded. because I had a feeling next time we wouldn't get away so easily. After what Martinez and I encountered in the tunnels, I found it impossible to shake the feeling that something was watching me. Even while I was above ground, in my apartment, I couldn't stop replaying the moment the figure turned toward us. The unnatural twitch, the way it mimicked our voices so perfectly. I didn't know what we had seen, but I knew one thing for certain: it hadn't been human. 2 days later, Cooper assigned me a new partner. Martinez had put in for temporary reassignment to surface patrol, an unspoken sign that what we saw had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. I didn't blame him. My new partner was Alvarez. She was experienced, confident, and, more importantly, she didn't ask questions she didn't want answers to. Our first shift together was a standard patrol. Check the tunnels, ensure no civilians had wandered where they shouldn't. I was relieved. I wasn't ready for another encounter with whatever was down there. For the first hour, everything was quiet. Just the usual dripping of water, the distant hum of the city above us. But then, as we passed through an older section of the tunnels, Alvarez stopped short. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I turned, my grip tightening on my flashlight. "See what?" She pointed ahead. A shadow. It moved fast. I swallowed hard. "An animal?" She shook her head. "Too big." We stood there, flashlights scanning the tunnel ahead. The air felt wrong. Heavy. And then, from somewhere in the distance, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. And coming straight toward us. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to hold steady. Alvarez raised a hand, signaling me to stay put. The footsteps continued, growing closer. Then they stopped. Silence. Alvarez turned to me, mouthing, "We need to go." I nodded. We moved carefully, stepping back the way we came, keeping our lights trained forward. That's when I saw it. A shape, just at the edge of our flashlight's reach. Not a person. It was too tall, its limbs too long. The head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if it was listening. My breath caught in my throat. Then it moved. Not walked, shifted. 1 second it was standing still, the next it was 10 feet closer. No sound. No motion. Just closer. Alvarez grabbed my arm. "Go. Now." We turned and ran. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I could hear Alvarez breathing heavily beside me, hear the splashes of water beneath our boots as we sprinted toward the nearest access ladder. And behind us, the footsteps started again. Faster this time. We made it to the ladder. Alvarez shoved me upward first. I climbed as fast as I could, hands slick with sweat. I didn't dare look down. She was right behind me. As soon as we hit the surface, we slammed the hatch shut. Locked it. Then we just stood there, panting, staring at each other. Finally, Alvarez spoke. "That wasn't human." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't." We reported everything to Cooper. He listened, nodded, and handed us 2 new laminated cards. Updated rules. There was a new one on the list. 8. If you see a shadow that moves too fast or too slow, do not follow it. It is not your shadow. And it is not alone. I didn't sleep that night. Because I knew. Whatever was down there, it had seen us too. After the last encounter, Alvarez and I weren't eager to return to the tunnels. But when you work search and rescue down here, you don't get the luxury of refusing a shift. We were given a simple route this time. A straight patrol along the main sewer line, no deep tunnels, no old maintenance shafts. Stay in the light. Stick to the marked paths. But as I had come to learn, the tunnels had their own plans. We started our patrol at midnight. The air was thick with dampness, the smell of rot settling into our clothes as we moved through the corridor. For a while, everything was quiet. The distant sound of running water, the occasional rustle of rats. Normal. Almost comforting in its routine. Then we heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought I had imagined it. A trick of the water moving through old pipes. But then it came again, soft, indistinct. Words I couldn't quite make out. I stopped, shining my flashlight toward the sound. Alvarez did the same. "You heard that, right?" she asked, voice low. I nodded. "Yeah." The whispering continued, just ahead of us, echoing off the damp walls. More than one voice now. Layered over each other, hushed and urgent, like a conversation we weren't meant to hear. I felt a chill run down my spine. "We should go." Alvarez hesitated. "What if it's someone trapped?" I shook my head. "You know the rules." She exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. We turned back the way we came, moving quickly, staying in the light. The whispers followed. I don't know when we realized they were saying our names. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then I heard it, clear as day. Daniel. Alvarez. We froze. Alvarez's hand shot out, gripping my arm. "That. Run." We sprinted. The tunnel twisted ahead of us, stretching farther than it should have. I knew this route. It was a straight path back to the access ladder. But now, it wasn't. It bent and curved, the walls pressing closer, the air thick with whispers. The voices weren't behind us anymore. They were all around us. My flashlight flickered. Alvarez swore, shaking hers as the beam dimmed. The walls pulsed, the concrete shifting like something breathing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, until they became a dull roar in my ears. Then, suddenly, silence. We stumbled into an open chamber. An old service junction, long abandoned. Our light stabilized, cutting through the dark. The whispers had stopped. Alvarez turned in a slow circle, breathing hard. "Where the hell are we?" I checked my map. This place wasn't on it. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through me. "We need to leave. Now." Alvarez nodded, but as we turned, something moved at the edge of the light. A figure. No. Figures. Standing just beyond our reach, watching. Their faces were wrong, stretched, blurred, shifting like static on an old TV screen. Then one of them stepped forward. And it had my face. I felt my stomach drop. The thing opened its mouth, and when it spoke, it was my voice. "You shouldn't be here." My legs refused to move. My breath caught in my throat. Alvarez grabbed my wrist. "Close your eyes." I didn't ask why. I shut them tight. "Now walk. Don't look. No matter what." I let her guide me. I kept my eyes shut as the whispers returned, louder than before. My own voice, Alvarez's voice, voices I didn't recognize, hissing and murmuring things I didn't want to understand. I kept walking, step after step, until the air shifted. The damp, heavy pressure lifted. The ground beneath my boots felt solid again. I opened my eyes. We were back at the ladder. Alvarez let out a shaky breath. "Go." We climbed without hesitation, bursting onto the surface like drowning people gasping for air. We slammed the hatch shut behind us, locking it tight. Neither of us spoke on the way back to the station. Cooper was waiting for us. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed us the rule sheet, and we both immediately saw the change. Rule number 9, if you hear whispers, do not follow them. If they say your name, do not answer. And if they sound like you, run. After the whispers, after the thing that spoke in my own voice, I thought I had seen the worst of the tunnels. But I was wrong. There are places down there that don't exist on any map. Places where time doesn't move right, where the walls seem to breathe, where the rules don't work the way they should. And sometimes, people go in and never come back. That night, we almost became one of them. Alvarez and I were assigned another patrol. Routine, they said. Just a simple sweep through Sector 3B, one of the older but safer tunnels. We didn't argue. After what we had seen, the idea of safe sounded good. We started at midnight, as usual. The tunnels were quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual sounds, water dripping, rats skittering, were gone. That was the first sign something was wrong. We walked for 20 minutes, checking the usual entry points, making sure no one had broken in. Everything was normal until it wasn't. The tunnel ahead of us changed. I don't mean it turned or branched off. I mean 1 second we were in Sector 3B, and the next, the walls were different. The concrete looked older, rougher. The markings that usually told us where we were, sector codes, directional arrows, were gone. Alvarez stopped. This isn't right. I checked my map. We were heading east. The tunnel should be a straight shot. She turned slowly, shining her flashlight behind us. The way we came was gone. Instead of a tunnel leading back to the surface, there was just more darkness, stretching on forever. I felt my stomach drop. No. No, no, no. Stay calm, Alvarez said, though I could hear the tension in her voice. We stick to protocol. We mark our path, keep track of turns, and keep moving. We'll find a way out. She pulled out a can of spray paint from her pack and marked a bright red X on the wall. We kept walking. An hour passed. Then 2. The tunnel never changed. It just went on endlessly. No intersections, no maintenance doors, no signs of where we were. And worst of all, no sign of the X we left behind. This is impossible, I whispered. Alvarez exhaled sharply. I don't like this. We kept walking. Our flashlights started to flicker. Our radios, usually our lifeline to the surface, only produced static. Then we heard the footsteps. At first, they were distant. Slow. Measured. Like someone was following us just out of sight. We stopped. So did the footsteps. Alvarez glanced at me. Did you hear that? I nodded. Yeah. We moved again. The footsteps followed. Faster this time. We turned a corner, though I swear there had been no corners before, and found ourselves facing something new. A door. Old, rusted, metal. It didn't belong here. None of this did. The footsteps behind us grew louder. We don't have a choice, Alvarez said. Inside. Now. She grabbed the handle and yanked it open. We stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind us. We were somewhere else now. The tunnel was gone. Instead, we stood in a massive chamber, bigger than anything that should exist underground. The walls stretched high above, disappearing into blackness. And we were not alone. Figures stood in the distance, just barely visible in the dim light. Not moving. Not breathing. Watching. Alvarez grabbed my arm. We need to leave. We turned, searching for the door. It was gone. A voice echoed through the chamber. Not a whisper. Not a mimicry. Something else. Something ancient. You are not supposed to be here. Alvarez tightened her grip on my sleeve. Run. We ran. The chamber seemed endless. No exits, no escape. The figures didn't move, but I could feel them watching. Then, a doorway. A maintenance hatch, small, barely visible against the dark wall. We sprinted for it. Alvarez reached it first, yanking it open, shoving me through. I turned, grabbing her arm, pulling her in behind me. The door slammed shut. Silence. We were back. The tunnels looked normal again. The markings returned. Our radios crackled back to life. I checked my watch. Only 10 minutes had passed. Neither of us spoke as we climbed the access ladder and emerged into the night air. We reported what happened to Cooper. He listened, then simply handed us an updated list of rules. A new one had been added. Rule number 10, If the tunnel keeps going but never changes, turn back immediately. If you find a door that shouldn't exist, do not open it. And if you hear footsteps that aren't yours, they already know you're there. After the night we got lost, Alvarez and I decided we needed a break from deep patrols. But the tunnels don't care what you want. They pull you back in. Cooper assigned us a new task: inspect the lower maintenance corridors beneath Sector 5. Standard check for structural issues. Simple. Except, down here, nothing is ever simple. We descended at midnight. The air was thick with moisture, the distant sound of dripping water filling the silence between our footsteps. Just in and out, Alvarez muttered, adjusting her flashlight. No distractions. I nodded, but I knew better. The tunnels had their own plans. 30 minutes in, everything seemed normal. We checked the main pipeline, marked down minor cracks in the concrete. Then, as we turned a corner, Alvarez stopped short. What the hell is that? I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. A mirror. It stood at the end of the tunnel, tall, old, its surface warped with age. The frame was rusted, covered in something that looked disturbingly like scratches. It didn't belong here. There was no reason for a mirror to be in the middle of an abandoned sewer tunnel. I swallowed hard. Cooper didn't mention this, did he? Nope. I turned to my radio. Command, this is Officer Daniels. We found something on in Sector 5. A mirror. Looks old. Should we remove it? Static. Alvarez tried hers. More static. We exchanged uneasy glances. We should leave, I said. Yeah. She took a step back. Our reflections didn't. I didn't realize it at first. Not until Alvarez made a strangled noise and grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. Daniel, she whispered. Look. I turned back to the mirror. Our reflections stood there, watching us. We weren't moving. But they were. My stomach twisted as my reflection slowly tilted its head, just slightly, just wrong enough for my instincts to scream at me to run. Alvarez's reflection smiled. Alvarez was not smiling. Turn off your light, she whispered. What? Just do it. Now. I hesitated, then clicked my flashlight off. She did the same. Darkness swallowed us. But the mirror still glowed faintly, like it was reflecting something that wasn't there. And then, in that dim, eerie light, I saw it. There were more of them. Shadows moved behind the glass, twisting, shifting. They weren't us. They were something else. I reached for Alvarez's hand. We leave. Now. She didn't argue. We stepped backward, keeping our eyes on the mirror. Our reflections remained, watching. Whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel them. Crawling under my skin, into my thoughts. Urging me to step forward. To come closer. Alvarez pulled me back. Don't listen. Just move. We turned and ran. The tunnel stretched too long. It should have taken us 30 seconds to reach the last junction, but we ran for minutes, breath ragged, the air thick and raw. Then, just as suddenly as it began, we stumbled back into familiar ground. The exit ladder was right ahead. We climbed without hesitation, slamming the hatch shut behind us. The whispers stopped. We reported everything to Cooper. He listened, nodded, then handed us the updated rules. A new one had been added. Rule number 11, if you find a mirror underground, do not approach it. Do not look at your reflection for too long. And if your reflection moves when you don't, run.